She walked into her own beach house and found another woman calling it home. Claire Harrington arrived at the Cape Cod house at 6:18 in the evening, just as the sun was lowering behind the dunes and turning the Atlantic into a sheet of pale silver. The old cedar shingles smelled of salt, rain, and summer heat, the same way they had when she was 8 years old and running barefoot from the porch to the beach with a towel around her shoulders. She had not planned to come that night. Wesley had told her the house was being aired out for the season, nothing more. Then Martin Hale, the property manager who had worked for her family since before her mother died, sent a careful message. "Mrs. Harrington, you should come before the weekend guests arrive." Claire knew from the wording that something was wrong. She parked beside the hydrangea path her mother had planted 20 years earlier and noticed 3 unfamiliar cars in the gravel drive. Music drifted from the open windows. Laughter moved through the house like it belonged there. Her hand closed around the old brass key in her pocket, the one her grandmother had given her when Claire turned 16, telling her that some doors were not gifts from men but inheritances from women who survived before her. Claire stepped inside without ringing the bell. The living room was bright with lamps and white candles. A tray of wine glasses sat on the coffee table. Wesley's friends stood near the stone fireplace, holding drinks, their smiles fading the moment they saw her. In the center of the room, Brooke Sinclair lifted a glass as if Claire had entered during a toast meant to continue without her. Brooke wore a white linen dress, simple enough to seem effortless, expensive enough to make the room feel staged. Her blonde hair fell over one shoulder, and her smile sharpened with the confidence of a woman who had rehearsed ownership in a mirror. "Welcome, everyone," Brooke said, still looking at Claire, "to our new summer home." A few people gave awkward little laughs. No one applauded. Claire looked past Brooke to the mantel. The framed photograph of Claire and Wesley from their early marriage was gone. So was the black and white picture of her grandmother standing on the dunes in 1976. On the side table, her mother's silver frame had been placed face down, the glass catching the last light from the windows. That hurt more than Brooke's voice. Wesley stood beside the fireplace in a pale summer jacket, one hand wrapped around a drink, his face still in that public calm he used whenever he wanted cruelty to look like inconvenience. He saw the photograph. He saw Claire notice it. He said nothing. Brooke took one slow step forward, lowering her glass with a hostess's smile. "Claire," she said, "I wish Wesley had told me you were stopping by. We are still settling in." The words were soft, but the room heard them correctly. Stopping by. As if Claire had come to visit. As if the house had shifted beneath her feet and chosen someone else. Claire felt the sting rise behind her eyes, but she did not let it fall. She looked at the upside-down frame, then at Wesley, then at the ocean beyond the glass doors. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet enough to make everyone listen. "Did you read the deed before you said that?" The room went still around Claire's question, not silent exactly, because the ocean still breathed beyond the glass doors, and someone's phone still played soft summer jazz from the kitchen, but still in the way people become when they realize a party has stepped onto private ground. Brooke blinked once, then smiled wider, as if the word deed were only a bitter little detail spoken by a woman who had not accepted replacement gracefully. Wesley set his glass on the mantel and came forward with the careful patience of a man trying to turn theft into manners. "Claire," he said, "this is not the time." She looked at him, then at the mantel where her grandmother's photograph should have been. The empty space was almost brighter than the picture had ever been, a clean rectangle of dustless wood surrounded by salt-stained stone. For a moment, Claire was not 38 years old in an ivory coastal dress, standing in front of her husband's friends while his mistress pretended to host her life. She was 11 again, sitting cross-legged on the same pine floor while her grandmother taught her how to polish seashells with a cotton cloth. She was 16, receiving the old brass key in a blue velvet pouch, while her mother said this house was not luxury, it was memory with walls. She was 25, watching her mother plant blue hydrangeas along the path after the doctors said the illness had returned, because some women prepare beauty even when they are afraid. Every board in that house knew Claire before Wesley did. The kitchen door still stuck in August humidity. The upstairs hallway still smelled faintly of cedar and lavender. The third step still made a soft creak because her grandfather had refused to replace the wood after the storm of 1998. This house had never been a wedding gift. It had never been one more asset in Wesley's polished version of marriage. It was the last place where Claire could still hear the women who raised her. Brooke walked to the side table and lifted the face-down silver frame without turning it over. "I was just trying to make the space feel less dated," she said lightly. "Wesley told me the house needed a fresh start." A few guests looked down at their drinks. Someone in the kitchen stopped laughing. Claire's eyes moved to Wesley. "You told her that?" Wesley exhaled through his nose, already annoyed that she had made him accountable in front of people he wanted to impress. "I told her this place has been stuck in the past for too long." Claire felt the sentence move through her like a cold tide. The past. Her mother's flowers. Her grandmother's key. The cracked ceramic bowl near the sink where they used to drop beach stones. Wesley had spent years calling those things sentimental when he wanted them moved, charming when donors visited, and family legacy when he needed the house to make him look rooted. He had brought clients here for lobster dinners. He had hosted 4th of July weekends on the deck. He had let photographers capture him in front of the dunes for magazine profiles about tradition and success. Claire had allowed it because, for too long, she believed sharing space meant sharing life. But sharing was not surrender. Brooke set the frame down again, still face down, and turned to the guests with a small laugh meant to soften the insult. "We are simply making room for what comes next." Claire looked through the glass doors at the Atlantic darkening beyond the porch. Then she touched the brass key in her pocket and said quietly, "This house already knows what belongs here." Wesley looked toward the guests before he looked at Claire, and that small delay told her exactly where his loyalty had moved. Not to Brooke, not completely. Wesley's first loyalty had always been to the version of himself that other people admired. He crossed the living room with that controlled half-smile he used when a conversation needed to be managed before it became honest. "Claire," he said quietly, "let us not do this in front of everyone." Brooke tilted her head with a look of soft triumph, as if Wesley's first concern had confirmed she belonged there more than the woman holding the old brass key in her pocket. Claire did not move. Behind Wesley, one of his friends pretended to study the ocean view. Another took a slow sip from a glass that had suddenly become fascinating. The room smelled of lemon candles, fresh paint samples, and sea air, but beneath it all Claire could still smell the cedar walls her grandfather had sealed by hand after the great winter storm. Brooke stepped closer to the fireplace and gestured toward a stack of fabric swatches on the coffee table. "Wesley and I were just talking about updating the house," she said. "The primary bedroom needs a cleaner look. Something less heavy. Less old family museum." Claire's eyes moved to Wesley. "You are changing the bedroom?" Brooke smiled before Wesley could answer. "I already spoke with a decorator in Chatham. She can come tomorrow morning. The curtains, the linens, maybe the headboard. Honestly, the whole room feels like it belongs to someone who refuses to move on." A quiet discomfort passed through the guests, but Brooke seemed to mistake it for attention. Wesley finally took Claire by the elbow, not roughly, but with the entitlement of a man who thought he could guide her out of the center of her own house. He led her a few steps into the narrow hallway beside the staircase, where framed watercolor paintings of the dunes still hung because Brooke had not reached them yet. "Keep your voice down," he said. Claire looked at his hand on her arm until he released it. "You brought her here," she said. "You let her turn my mother's pictures face down. You let her call this our summer home." Wesley's jaw tightened. "She is trying to help me create something livable. Something that is not haunted by your family history." Claire looked past him toward the stairwell, toward the landing where her mother used to sit with a mug of tea when the morning fog rolled in. The word haunted almost made her smile. Men like Wesley called women's memories ghosts when they could not profit from them anymore. She asked, "Did you tell her she is standing in my mother's house?" Wesley exhaled, impatient now. "It became ours when we married." There it was, the sentence he had been building toward for years. Ours. A soft word when spoken with love. A dangerous one when used as a crowbar. Claire studied him in the dim hallway light. He looked elegant, successful, certain that marriage had turned her inheritance into his atmosphere. "You should have read the deed before you said that," she replied. His expression changed, just slightly. Not enough for Brooke to notice from the living room, but enough for Claire. Then Brooke appeared at the end of the hallway, still holding her glass, smiling as if she had walked into a scene already decided. "Wesley," she said, "the contractor wants to confirm the gate code for tomorrow. Also, I moved Claire's beach coats into the storage room. They were taking up space." Claire looked at Wesley. He said nothing. That silence folded neatly into every silence before it. Every time he let her name shrink on an invitation. Every time he called her grief difficult. Every time he treated her inheritance as scenery for his new life. Claire reached into her pocket and touched the brass key again. It was cool, solid, older than his promises. Then she turned back toward the living room, where her mother's frame still lay face down under the lamp. She did not pick it up yet. Not in front of them. Not while they still believed the house was waiting for permission to remember her. Instead, she looked at Brooke and said, "Change whatever you want tonight. Tomorrow morning, the house will answer." 3 months earlier, Claire had first understood that Wesley was not only betraying their marriage. He was studying the edges of her inheritance to see where his name might fit. It began with an email printed at the bottom of a shared household account. One of those dull messages people overlook because dull things often carry the most danger. Property valuation request. Cape Cod residence. Family restructuring. Claire was sitting at the kitchen table in their Boston townhouse, sorting through medical bills from a charity auction her mother had once supported, when she saw Wesley's message to a private banker. The language was smooth, careful, and ugly in its politeness. The property should be available for family restructuring, he had written. Potential collateral value may be reviewed discreetly. For a moment, Claire simply stared at the words. The property, not her grandmother's house, not her mother's porch, not the hydrangea path, not the place where 3 generations of women had carried grief, birthdays, storms, and quiet Sunday breakfasts. Wesley had reduced it to an asset line. Available. Collateral. Restructuring. Claire did not call him from the next room. She did not throw the laptop closed. She saved the email, printed it, and placed it in a blue folder beside the old brass key. By noon, she was in downtown Boston, sitting across from Eleanor Price, the real estate attorney who had handled the Harrington Morris Coastal Trust after Claire's mother died. Eleanor had known Claire since she was 22, back when grief still made her speak softly and sign carefully. She read Wesley's email twice without changing expression. Then she reached for her glasses and said, "We need the title chain." Claire watched Eleanor pull files from a locked cabinet. The original deed copy, the trust certificate, the prenuptial schedule, coastal property tax records, occupancy permissions, and the old transfer agreement from her grandmother to her mother. The papers looked almost too plain for the power they carried. Cream pages, notary stamps, signatures, county seals, typed descriptions of dunes and boundary lines. Yet each sheet spoke more clearly than Wesley ever had. The house had entered the Harrington Morris Coastal Trust before Claire married. Claire was the sole beneficiary and sole authorized decision-maker for transfer, renovation, occupancy permission, and use as collateral. Wesley had permissive marital use only when Claire allowed it. He could stay there as her husband. He could host guests if she agreed. He could not pledge it, sell it, remodel it, assign it, gift it, or invite another woman to treat it as a future home. Eleanor tapped the prenuptial schedule with one finger. He either never read this, or he hoped you forgot it. Claire looked at her name printed beside the word beneficiary and felt something inside her steady. For years, Wesley had spoken about the house as if love had blurred the ink. But love did not erase a trust. Marriage did not rewrite a deed. Eleanor closed the folder and said, "If he tries to claim authority over the house, do not argue emotionally. Let him make the claim clearly. Let witnesses hear it. Then we answer with the original deed." Claire thought of the brass key in her purse, worn smooth by women who had protected the house before her. She nodded once, not because she wanted a fight, because she finally understood that some doors only stay open when the paper behind them is stronger than the man trying to walk through. Eleanor's office had no ocean view, no white candles, no staged laughter, and no one pretending that memory could be redecorated out of a house. It was a quiet room above a narrow Boston street, lined with law books, framed certificates, and one photograph of Eleanor shaking hands with a county clerk 20 years earlier. Claire sat across from her while the attorney turned the pages of the Harrington Morris Coastal Trust with the steady care of someone handling a living thing. "This," Eleanor said, "is where Wesley's assumption fails." She placed the trust certificate beside the original deed copy, then drew a clean line with her finger from the county seal to Claire's printed name. "The beach house is not marital property. It is not jointly titled. It did not enter the marriage through purchase, refinance, or transfer. It was placed into trust before your wedding, and you remain the sole beneficiary. Claire looked at the language again. Sole beneficiary. Sole authorized occupant. Sole decision-maker for transfer, renovation, collateral use, and third-party occupancy permission. The words were dry, but they felt like boards beneath her feet. Solid. Old. Refusing to collapse. Eleanor continued. Wesley has permissive use only while you allow it. That means he may enjoy the property as your spouse, but he cannot convert that permission into ownership. He cannot offer residence to Brooke. He cannot hire contractors for permanent changes. He cannot change gate access, pledge the house to a bank, or represent it as his asset. Claire listened without interrupting. Every sentence rebuilt the walls Wesley had tried to speak through. For years, he had used softer words. Our place. Our summers. Our deck. Our view. In the beginning, those words had sounded like partnership. She remembered watching him carry grocery bags through the kitchen in July, kissing her mother on the cheek when she was still alive, telling Claire he loved how the house made him feel like part of something older than ambition. Later, he used the same house for clients, investors, and magazine photographs. He learned which window gave the best sunset behind his profile. He learned how to tell stories about family tradition without mentioning that none of the tradition was his. Claire had mistaken access for gratitude. Eleanor had a colder word for it. Reliance. He relied on your silence, she said, not your consent. That distinction matters. Claire looked down at the brass key resting on the table beside the documents. The key was scratched near the bow, worn bright at the teeth, heavier than anything Wesley had ever promised. Eleanor opened another folder. I requested a certified copy of the original deed from the county recorder this morning. It will arrive at the Cape Cod house by courier tomorrow, along with the title report and trust summary. Claire looked up. Tomorrow? Eleanor nodded. If Wesley or Brooke makes any claim tonight, let witnesses hear it. Martin Hale should document any attempted changes. Do not argue over emotion. Do not let them pull you into a marital fight. This is property authority. Claire remembered Brooke's voice in the living room, bright and careless, calling the place a new summer home. She remembered Wesley saying it became ours when we married. Eleanor must have seen the pain cross her face because her tone softened. Claire, this house was protected long before he decided it was useful. Your mother made sure of that. That was when Claire finally understood the quiet mercy of women who plan ahead. Her grandmother had saved the land. Her mother had put it in trust. Claire had kept the key. Wesley thought he was taking a house from one woman. He had not realized he was standing against 3 generations of signatures. Back in the Cape Cod living room, the evening had deepened into that blue hour when the ocean outside looked calm enough to forgive anything, even the people standing inside a house that did not belong to them. Claire remained near the hallway, one hand resting lightly in the pocket that held the brass key, while Brooke moved through the room with the quick confidence of someone rearranging a life she had not earned. She picked up fabric swatches from the coffee table, held them against the pale walls, and spoke to Wesley as if Claire were only an old detail still waiting to be removed. The decorator says we can brighten the entire place by the weekend, Brooke said. New curtains, new linens, maybe something modern for the primary bedroom. Wesley glanced at Claire, then away. That glance was his confession, not the affair. Claire already knew that. The confession was smaller and colder. He wanted the house to change because the house remembered too much. It remembered her mother laughing by the kitchen window. It remembered her grandmother rinsing sand from blue bowls in the sink. It remembered every summer before Wesley arrived with expensive shoes, smooth ambition, and the careful talent of making other people's legacies look like his lifestyle. Brooke lifted her phone and began speaking to someone on speaker, bright and practical. Yes, tomorrow morning works. We will need measurements for the bedroom, the porch drapes, and possibly the built-in shelves. The owner wants a cleaner look. Claire watched Wesley's face. He did not correct the word owner. Martin Hale appeared in the kitchen doorway at that exact moment, wearing an old navy sweater and holding a set of house maintenance keys. He had opened shutters in this house for 30 summers, fixed pipes after nor'easters, and once carried Claire's mother from the porch when a treatment left her too weak to stand in the sea wind. He looked from Brooke's phone to Wesley, then to Claire, and his expression became very still. Brooke noticed him and smiled with the same borrowed authority. Martin, perfect. Tomorrow the contractor will need the gate code, and I would like Claire's old coats moved fully out of the mudroom. Maybe storage is best until she decides what to take. Martin did not answer her. He looked at Claire. That small act, a simple refusal to look to Brooke for permission, steadied something inside the room. Wesley stepped in quickly. Martin, just help Brooke with whatever she needs tonight. Claire is being sensitive about the transition. The transition. Claire almost repeated it, but there was no need. Every careless phrase was becoming record. Every witness mattered. She took out her phone and sent Eleanor one message. They are claiming authority in front of witnesses. Brooke is calling contractors. Wesley is allowing it. The reply came less than a minute later. Good. Do not argue tonight. Certified deed arrives by morning. Martin can document access instructions. Claire read the message, then slipped the phone back into her pocket beside the brass key. Brooke ended the call and turned with a satisfied breath, as if morning had already given her the house. Wesley moved toward the deck doors, avoiding Claire's eyes, while the guests began drifting toward the porch for dinner, eager to escape the discomfort without surrendering the invitation. Brooke passed Claire with a soft smile. You will feel better once the old things are cleared out, she said. Claire looked toward the side table, where her mother's photograph still lay face down beneath the lamp. Not old things, she said quietly. Original things. Brooke's smile faded for half a second. Outside, the dinner candles were being lit on the porch. The ocean kept moving in the dark. Claire did not pick up the photograph yet. She let it stay where Brooke had placed it, not as defeat, but as evidence. Tomorrow morning, the house would not need her anger. It would have the deed. By 8:30, the porch had become the kind of beautiful place where humiliation could pretend to be hospitality. Lanterns glowed along the railing. The dinner table was set with white plates and blue linen napkins, and the Atlantic moved in the darkness beyond the dunes with the patience of something older than every lie spoken inside the house. Brooke stood at the head of the table as if the position had been assigned by law instead of vanity. Wesley sat near her, his jacket removed, his sleeves rolled neatly, performing ease for guests who no longer looked entirely comfortable. Claire sat at the far end, not because anyone placed her there, but because she had chosen the seat closest to the stairs that led down to the sand. Her mother used to sit there on warm nights, bare feet tucked beneath the chair, listening to the water before answering any serious question. The memories steadied Claire more than the wine beside her untouched plate. Brooke lifted her glass, and the conversation faded with relief, grateful for anything that felt planned. I just want to say how happy I am that all of you could be here, Brooke began, smiling into the candlelight. This house has so much potential, and Wesley has been generous enough to let me imagine what it can become. Claire looked at Wesley. He watched Brooke with a careful expression, not proud exactly, but unwilling to interrupt the fantasy he had helped her build. Brooke continued, growing warmer as the silence gave her room. For a long time, this place has belonged to the past. Beautiful, yes, but frozen. I think every home needs someone who knows how to bring it forward. A woman who truly belongs here. The words landed across the porch, softer than a slap, cleaner than a shout, more public than either. One of Wesley's friends lowered his fork. Another looked toward Claire and quickly away. Martin Hale stood just inside the kitchen door, holding a tray he had forgotten to set down. He heard every word. Claire placed her old brass key on the table beside her plate. The small sound of metal against wood cut through Brooke's speech more sharply than any answer. Brooke noticed the key and smiled, mistaking it for sentiment. That is sweet, Claire, she said. Maybe tomorrow we can decide which keepsakes you want to take with you. Wesley closed his eyes for half a second, as if even he understood she had gone too far, but still he said nothing. That was the final shape of his betrayal. Not passion, not confusion. Permission. Claire looked at the key, then at the dark outline of the hydrangeas beyond the porch. She remembered her grandmother pressing that key into her hand, saying that a woman should know which doors no one else gets to give away. Brooke lifted her glass again. To new beginnings, she said. To a real home by the water. A few glasses rose slowly, uncertainly. Claire did not lift hers. She only looked at Brooke with a calm that made the younger woman's smile thin at the edges. Wesley leaned toward Claire and whispered, "Please do not ruin dinner." Claire turned to him, her voice low enough that only he and Martin could hear. "You already made it evidence." Wesley's face changed. Across the table, Brooke laughed lightly and began talking about paint colors for the primary bedroom, unaware that the house was listening through every witness she had gathered. Claire left the brass key on the table for the rest of the night, catching candlelight beside her untouched glass. She did not defend her place there. She let Brooke describe tomorrow as if tomorrow belonged to her. By morning, the deed would describe it better. Morning arrived without asking anyone who had claimed the house the night before. At 8:07 a.m., pale sunlight moved across the kitchen floor, touching the blue bowls near the sink, the salt-dulled windows, and the side table where Claire's mother's photograph still lay face down exactly as Brooke had left it. The house smelled of coffee, ocean air, and fresh measuring tape. Brooke was already awake, moving through the living room with a decorator on the phone, pointing toward curtains, built-in shelves, and the staircase as if she were guiding a future that belonged to her. Wesley stood near the kitchen island in a white shirt with the sleeves rolled back, speaking quietly to a banker and using the same careful voice he used when turning risk into confidence. Claire sat at the porch table with the old brass key beside her cup, watching the morning fog lift from the dunes. She had slept little, but the tiredness in her body felt clean. It was not the exhaustion of begging to be believed. It was the stillness of waiting for proof to arrive. Martin Hale was outside near the gate, pretending to inspect the hydrangeas while keeping his phone in his hand. At 8:07 exactly, the gravel driveway sounded under unfamiliar tires. Brooke paused near the living room windows. Wesley ended his call too quickly. Claire did not move. A county courier stepped out of a dark sedan holding a certified envelope, and behind him came Eleanor Price in a navy suit, carrying a leather document case against her side. Martin opened the gate before anyone inside could speak. Brooke walked to the front door with the bright irritation of someone whose morning had been interrupted by paperwork she did not respect. "Can I help you?" she asked. Eleanor looked past her, directly to Claire. "Mrs. Harrington, the certified deed and title report have arrived from the county recorder." The room changed temperature. Wesley appeared behind Brooke, his face tightening around the edges. Claire rose slowly and walked into the living room. No one spoke as Eleanor placed the envelope on the dining table and opened it with quiet precision. The decorator's voice still came faintly from Brooke's phone until Brooke ended the call with one finger. Eleanor removed the certified deed, the title chain, the Harrington Morris Coastal Trust certificate, and the occupancy authority summary, laying each page flat beneath the morning light. Then she read without drama. "The Cape Cod residence is held by the Harrington Morris Coastal Trust. Claire Harrington is the sole beneficiary and sole authorized decision-maker for transfer, renovation, collateral use, and third-party occupancy permission. Wesley Harrington holds no title interest and no independent authority to alter, pledge, assign, or grant occupancy rights to any person without written consent from Claire Harrington." The words did not need volume. They entered the house like keys turning in every lock. Brooke looked at Wesley, waiting for him to dismiss it. He did not. Martin stepped inside and stood near the kitchen door, quiet but unmistakably present. Eleanor continued, "Any contractor access arranged without Mrs. Harrington's approval is canceled. Any claimed authority by a third party is invalid. Any gate code changes must be restored under the property manager's supervision." Brooke's face lost the confidence it had worn so carefully the night before. "This is ridiculous," she said, but her voice had nowhere to stand. Wesley tried to recover first. "Eleanor, there has been a misunderstanding. We were only discussing updates." Claire looked at the face-down photograph of her mother, then at the deed on the table. "No," she said softly. "You were discussing ownership." The ocean moved beyond the windows. Eleanor slid the certified deed toward Claire. Wesley looked at the paper as if it had arrived from the past to correct him. Brooke stood in the living room she had called a new beginning, surrounded by walls that had never belonged to her, while the original deed lay in front of the woman who had never needed to raise her voice to be the owner. Claire placed one hand on the certified deed, not to claim it, but to steady the room around the truth it had carried all night without needing permission. Brooke stood near the sofa, still in the same white linen dress she had worn like a flag of arrival, but morning had changed the fabric into something smaller. The decorator's measuring tape lay abandoned on the coffee table beside the fabric swatches, the same table where Claire's mother's photograph still faced the wood. Wesley looked from the deed to Eleanor Price, then to Martin Hale, searching for a softer version of the facts. He found none. Eleanor closed the trust certificate and said, "Mrs. Harrington has instructed that all unauthorized contractor appointments are canceled. Martin, please restore the original gate access and document the change." Martin nodded once. "Already started, ma'am." Brooke turned toward Wesley, her voice lower now, stripped of the bright hostess tone from the night before. "You told me this was yours." Wesley's face tightened, because there was no answer that would save him in front of the house, the lawyer, the property manager, and the woman whose inheritance he had tried to rename. "I said it was ours," he muttered. Claire looked at him. "That was the problem, Wesley. You kept using a word you had no right to sign." The ocean rolled beyond the windows, calm and indifferent. Brooke's eyes moved toward the door as if leaving had suddenly become the only elegant thing left. Eleanor turned to her with professional clarity. "Miss Sinclair, you do not have occupancy permission. Any personal belongings brought for the weekend should be removed today. Martin will coordinate access." No one raised a voice. That made it colder. Brooke opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time since Claire had walked in the evening before, Brooke seemed to understand that the house had never been waiting to accept her. It had only been waiting for paperwork to arrive. Wesley stepped closer to Claire, lowering his voice as if privacy could still be manufactured in the ruins of public arrogance. "Claire, we can fix this. We can talk. This does not need to become legal." Claire almost smiled, not because anything was funny, but because men like Wesley always discovered intimacy when documents stopped favoring them. "Last night, you let her call my inheritance her home," she said. "The deed called it mine first." His eyes flickered, and for a moment she saw the old version of him trying to return, the gentle husband who once carried groceries through that kitchen, the man who had kissed her mother's cheek and said he was honored to be part of the family. But memory was not ownership either. Claire walked to the side table and lifted her mother's silver frame. A faint line of dust marked where it had been face down. She wiped the glass with the edge of her sleeve and set the photograph back upright on the mantel. Her mother smiled from another summer, hair lifted by wind, eyes bright against the dunes. Then Claire took the old brass key from the porch table and placed it beneath the frame. The room shifted around that simple act. Not dramatic. Final. Brooke gathered her phone and purse without looking at the guests who had watched her toast to a future that never had a title. Wesley remained by the dining table, the certified deed between them like a coastline he could no longer cross. Martin stepped outside to reset the gate. Eleanor collected the papers, leaving the certified deed in front of Claire. When the front door closed behind the first departing guest, the house seemed to exhale. Claire opened the glass doors to the porch, and sea air moved through the rooms, lifting the curtains Brooke had planned to replace. She stood there quietly, listening to the waves reach the shore below. She did not take the house back. She simply opened the door with the key that had always been hers.